I have a profound dislike of big stages, and added to that, a profound dislike of many people looking at me. And there is a reason why I'm saying this. Yeah, I was reflecting this morning, how can I set the context for what I want to share with you today? And what I intend to do is give you some generic examples of where elements of Sociocracy 3.0, also known as S3, which I'll use from now on, is being pulled into organizations in different ways. But I wanted to bring in the human element as well in my conversation today. And so there was a couple of synchronicities. One is being here on the stage and feeling slightly anxious to speak to all of you this morning, which reminds me when I was a boy and I learned to play the piano. And my mother used to insist on me participating in music festivals where I played the piano, a single piece, along with 20 other kids. And judges would sit there and score all of us kids and say who won, who came second, who came third, and so on. I used to be so nervous in those situations that I would wait outside until it was my turn, and often I would vomit before going into the space. Yeah. Now, we all deal with life in different ways, but this was my way of avoiding some kind of criticism or some kind of failure. You know, and for me, this idea of fail fast, it's easy to say, we can say it quickly, but it brings up all kinds of challenges, yeah, depending on the context. So, since that time, I've been learning to find my confidence to speak up and to create an environment where I feel safe to be able to present myself. So this topic of performance and how do we facilitate effective performance in organizations, this is a big deal for us to be considering. The other thing that happened was last night, one of the speakers who very respectfully wrote to me this morning to kind of address the topic, explained that today they would be trashing sociocracy and holacracy and other things like this. And I was a little shocked in the moment because it was our introductory conversation. We just met one another. Anyway, mainly I reacted in that situation because I felt a bit protective of S3. And I thought, well, this guy doesn't really understand it yet. And it brought me to reflect on a common problem we have as human beings, which is to make assumptions about things on the basis of our first glance without really diving in to find out the details. So I think this particular speaker made this mistake. My mistake was then to react. Instead of pausing, reflecting on the situation and asking myself what would be the most appropriate thing to do. So I woke up this morning feeling a bit sad and dismayed just about our condition as human beings, and also a bit ashamed. And I was so delighted when this gentleman wrote to me this morning to acknowledge the conversation and we had an exchange. So this other topic of alignment, like alignment of our understanding, alignment of our activity, alignment and performance, two crucial elements of collaboration. So, Sociocracy 3.0, co-created by myself and Bernard Bockelbrink, Agile coach out of Berlin, and more recently as well, Liliana David. Well, I've never used this thing before. I won't use it again. Liliana David. The three of us together are what's known as the co-developers of Sociocracy 3.0. So, for those of you who don't know, sociocracy basically means rule by the social group, as opposed to rule by the demos, or rule by those with voting privilege. It doesn't rely on majority, it relies on argument. Yeah, so supremacy in sociocracy goes to reason. Yeah, reasons why doing things are a good idea, or reasons why doing things are a bad idea so that we can consider it and change it. It's got a long history. 1851 was when the concept was first conceived, and Sociocracy 3.0, Bernard and I launched in March 2015. Very MVP, proof of concept. I'm not sure exactly what it was, and we're still evolving it today. The reason we launched it was Bernard wanted to create a set of resources, learning resources for the Agile community, to be able to integrate elements of the Sociocratic circle method and make it appropriate for tech, basically. He saw that people were awesome at organizing work, and applying agility to development of products and services, but not so awesome at governance, applying agile mindset to how we make and evolve agreements and grow organizations as a whole. Yeah, so how to bring agility to the entire organization. And we started putting together these resources and soon realized that actually the current methods were inadequate. In some cases, elements of it worked. In some cases, it was problematic. In some cases, it was irrelevant. Yeah, so we've got many methodologies today, Sociocratic circle method being one of them, holacracy being another. We have other frameworks like SAFE and LESS. Yeah, and one of my big bugbears, or concerns at least, is the imposition or mandating of these frameworks or methods into organizations. Yeah. I think from one perspective it's an act of violence and something to be considered carefully. So Bernard and I said, well, if not this, what? So we took a look at many different practices that people were using in the world and pulled in all of the ones that we thought were valuable enough to include in what we call the S3 framework. So these patterns are adaptable, optional, and modular. So you can piece them together. You can take one as a standalone. You can pull in many. You can apply it like a method if you want to, but you can also take it piece by piece and use according to your context. It's also freely available, so everything here and all resources we create, we offer Creative Commons license into the world. And just to give you an idea, these are the categories of patterns. So I'm not going to run through them today, but it's like a menu, yeah? This is dessert and starter, and you can dive in and there's various options for your different contexts. So I'm just going to give a bit more background before I get into more examples today. So the 7 principles, there's so many principles woven into the patterns of S3 that I don't think I could list them all. Things like respect, respect one another, be decent, lifelong learning and unlearning, yeah? But 7 of them what we chose to kind of name specifically were these. And consent, for many who are familiar with sociocracy, is a fundamental element. This is the thing around do things in the absence of reasons not to. Yeah? And if there's a reason not to, then change what you're doing. It's common sense, and as I often say, sense is not common. Every day we all do things when there's reasons not to do them. And equivalence is the essence of sociocracy. It's basically the people doing the work being the ones to decide how to do the work, the people affected by decisions being the ones to make and evolve those decisions. And the others I won't drill into for this presentation, but they'll be available afterwards for you to consider. So, alignment and performance. When I first heard these words, it was a corporate who said to me, James, if you're going to present S3 to corporates, then you need to talk about performance and alignment. Because if you don't show them how this is going to bring more of that, then they're not going to be interested in what you have to say. And I had a bit of a reaction, because particularly to the word performance, I feel a little uncomfortable for reasons I was explaining earlier. But I thought about that for a while, and what it led to was an inquiry, what are the different dimensions of an organization that are important to consider and address if we want to have alignment throughout the whole system and performance in all the ways that that can be understood. And what it led to is what we call the 4 dimensions. It's just 4 dimensions. You might think of other dimensions. That's fine. But I want to use these as the basis of the conversation for today. So, agility, participation, agreeing, like making evolving agreements, and doing stuff. And the last days, I went around asking a few people, can you give me some examples of where you think organizations are challenged today? Yeah. And I invited them to think about it in the context of these dimensions. So I'm just going to, I wrote them down because there were so many, I couldn't remember them all, and I didn't want to bombard you on the slides. So unclear contracting and accountability. I was talking to someone, they said, oh, we've got somebody on board, and we don't really want them on board anymore. How do we deal with that? So I asked them, did you have a contract? What does the contract say? Did you have a probationary period? How did you kind of frame their domain? Did you clarify their domain? Did you build in regular feedback for these people, to this person, to help them develop and grow, so that maybe they could adjust and learn from your feedback, and maybe you don't have to get rid of them and so on. And no, there was no contract, so now they're in a sticky position. So undefined domains, you know, it's not my job, yeah, or it's not my domain, or oh, that looks horrible, but it's not mine, so I'll just ignore it and hope it goes away. Ineffective response to dependencies. I see this in organizations that claim to be agile, like awesome collaborative team, singular. Awesome collaborative team, silo. Another awesome collaborative team, silo. Yeah, I'm not saying this is in every case, I'm generalizing here for drama and effect. Okay, but and many cross-dependencies. So you've got rework, you've got people doubling up, cross-dependencies that aren't being addressed, conflict between the teams, and ultimately super ineffectiveness throughout the organization. Confusion between accountability and delegation. I spoke to a C, let's just say a C for now, recently, and they were explaining to me their challenges, and they were doing all the work they weren't meant to be doing, but were accountable for. And all the things that other people should be doing, they were doing. Did I say that right? I don't think I did. Yeah, they were doing the things that they weren't meant to be doing, but they were accountable for. Yeah, so they were taking the work of the people, and meanwhile expecting the people to do the things that they were accountable for. It was like super confusion around what the key responsibilities were for this person. Designing structure, and methods, implementing them and trying to fit people into them. Yeah. I think of Zappos. You know, I don't think that kind of leave rate is ethical, actually. One size fits all solutions. Just doesn't work. Mandating agile. Yeah. On participation, lack of ownership. You know, in a startup, there's a startup down here at the front. Yeah, I bet these guys are super engaged right now. Yeah, it's like a really exciting moment. Everybody's there because they want to be. Maybe there's not so much economic security and so on, and people are just invested in the product. But when it gets to 1,000 people or 10,000 people or 50,000 people, is there any sense of ownership still then? How do we facilitate ownership in an organization? No voice to influence. You know, nobody would listen anyway, so what's the point in me saying anything? False autonomy. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, no, stop. No, sorry, you can't do that. Disconnection from the bigger picture and purpose. Just blinkers. I've got no idea why I'm doing what I'm doing. I just do it. I just fulfill a function. Lack of feeling the gains and the costs. I made someone else so much value, and I saw none of it. So fairness, yeah, is one of the most intuitive measures that we have as human beings, justice and fairness. Inadequate feedback and appreciation. You were awesome. She's awesome, by the way. You were awesome. Yeah, just telling people what they do well and offering people constructive feedback about how they can improve. So, polarization, fundamentalism. Oh, S3 is the way, and holacracy is crap. Identification with individualism or collectivism. Yeah, someone said to me, there's a big drama in Warsaw right now about psychopaths. Because if you're an environmentalist, then you're a commie. Yeah, so we've got this left-right paradigm. It's the false left-right paradigm, binary thinking between people, polarization on the basis of values. You getting the point? Yeah, there's a lot of challenges we're facing, right, in organizations today. Decision-making, like unclear why, the binary thinking, poor communication, autocracy, people telling people what to do, or death by consensus. Oh, we're all so nice. Nobody wants to take control. Nobody wants to lead. Yeah, so we don't decide anything. Does anyone relate to that? No? We call it progressive, right? It's like radical egalitarianism. Unclarity, just about basic decision-making. How do we make and evolve agreements together? Disconnection between decision-makers and the people affected by the decisions or doing the work. Perfection, whatever that is. Predict and control mindset, agreements. But I mean, I could just go on and on and on, no? I don't think I'll get to the doing because I think most of you in this room are awesome at doing. I've learned nearly everything I know about organizing work from meeting and talking with people like you. So thanks for that. Okay, so let's get in the meat and potatoes of today. What I want to do is give some generic examples then of how I see S3 being pulled into organizations. And the first one is this thing called driver. If in the room you've heard this word driver in relation to S3, not the bus, could you just raise your hand if you're familiar with this word, just so I can see? Okay, so it's a meme that's spreading. Yeah? It's a bit like people kind of correlate it with purpose, yeah, or vision. But it's not actually purpose or vision, no? It's something much more concrete than that. It's a situation that motivates us to action. You know, and as human beings, you are an awesome driver spotting entity. You spend every moment of your existence noticing things that draw your attention, yeah, via an inner experience that we could call tension. Yeah, making a decision whether or not it's a situation that you would like to change, and if so, asking yourself what's needed, and then acting or reacting at least to bring about that change. Yeah? So, driver, a situation that motivates action, simply described in a brief statement. Let's see if I can do this again. So sensitive. There. Described in a brief statement, explaining something happening and something needed. We spend a lot of time developing features based on speculation. I know that doesn't happen in this room. We need to agree on ways to validate our assumptions earlier. It's the art of stating the obvious, and it's like a little bundle of data. And when we've got that bundle of data, we identify it, we can consider, is it relevant? And if it is, ask, is it ours to do, or should we pass it to somebody else, and whose domain is it so that they can get on and act in some kind of way? This seems to be quite a popular thing for people, and I was really surprised how inadequately equipped most organizations are to take simple data like this and get it from the person who observes it to the people who are most able to respond or accountable to take care of it. Yeah. There's so much information available in each of us, and yet many organizations today just aren't passing it. So making this conscious and asking, how can I be accountable for this situation, and what should I do with it, and who would be most appropriate to respond to it, is really a big service that all of us can make from this moment forwards, not just in our organizations, but in our entire lives. So, passing drivers into the group brain, yeah, into the collective intelligence of the organization, for people to consider, decide what to do with it, and pass it to those people who are most able to respond. So we kind of insights emerging through the individual, you know, like a nerve ending in the system, processing what it is, putting it into the group brain, exposing it to loads of intelligence to come up with creative ideas and permissions around what to do about it, defining constraints, and then it ends up on somebody's backlog again so they can actually do it. And on that topic, agree or just do it. So another pattern that we see organizations pulling in is this one of governance backlog. So instead of just having a backlog for your work, you have a specific backlog for those drivers that would benefit from being processed by a group. Yeah? Some kind of group decision that is necessary or preferable. So very simple to do. Just you can visualize it on the wall in your office, you can have it on a Trello board or whatever your preferred kind of online way of organizing work is. To do, agenda, done. Simple driver statements, clarity around what's needed, time box for how long you expect, and then have a dedicated meeting where you come together to co-create and come up with awesome, good enough for now, safe enough to try agreements. Experiments, like Alistair was saying, good enough for now, safe enough to try, iterative, incremental agreements that you can learn from, fail fast if necessary, and then build on through experience. One other prerequisite for that is that the decision-making goes from an individual to a group. Okay, so I think this is one of these significant changes. When I hear people say, oh, no more managers, I get a bit concerned about that. Firstly, I've been a manager, and I thought I did a pretty good job, and I brought value.
Good.
Yeah, and I meet many people who are in management positions today, and probably will be for the rest of their lives due to the context that they find themselves in. And I don't think managers are the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we break management down, we can see a couple of things. Somebody said mentoring to me last night, and I thought that was an interesting point, because I think we can all mentor each other. I don't think it requires a manager only to do that. So how do we get feedback from everybody? More on this later. But if we break management down, there's two elements to it. It's coordination of work and making and evolving decisions. Okay, so Sociocracy and S3 then takes the hat of decision-making off of the manager within the group and brings it to the group, and includes various patterns for collaborative decision-making. We had a workshop on that yesterday. Clarify the why, come together, tap collective intelligence, come up with a good enough and safe enough to try agreement that you can then experiment with. I added this slide last thing this morning because I thought it's really worth mentioning. This is not an S3 pattern that you'll find on the website, but Lily and we made a tour in Brazil a year or so back. We did 5 courses, and I don't know if any of you are from Brazil or you've been to Brazil, but it's quite a different vibe there, the culture to Poland. Yeah? I mean, there's a lot of heart, there's a lot of expression, there's a lot of emotion. Anyway. And we left Brazil, and one of the people wrote to us excitedly, who's kind of leading on taking S3 into consciousness in Brazil, and said, we've got another backlog. It's the emotional backlog. It's awesome because anytime somebody freaks out, like in a governance meeting or in a retro or whatever, we just say, hey, I think that's a driver for the emotional backlog. And they've got dedicated time during their week where they process this kind of stuff, which helps to build trust. It honors people, because when you're pissed off about something, then is that breaking the I don't know, we've got a language thing here, I'm sorry if I just broke that. But we get people who are profoundly upset, and it's really valuable to say, hey, we recognize it, and we're going to take it seriously, and let's make a dedicated time where we'll deal with it. So I thought this was a really cool idea. And it kind of addresses that question, supremacy to reason, isn't sociocracy all about mind, and what about heart, and what about feelings, and what about relationship? You can use it any way you like, and definitely consider people's feelings and the relationships of one another within your organization. So, agreeing. I just wanted to show you this cycle, because this is kind of like a feedback loop. I think Alistair was showing us something similar. I forget those 4 dimensions I enjoyed that he shared earlier, the heart of Agile. But clarify the why, co-create, good enough agreements, and experiment and learn. And the learn bit is really important, because if we're going to have good enough for now, safe enough to try agreements, we need to record them. They need to be available, and they need to be regularly reviewed to see whether they're really good enough and safe enough to continue, or even still relevant. So people are keeping their agreements alive in the consciousness of the different groups that make them. Instead of just some archaic file somewhere, lost in minutes that were transcribed, that nobody ever read, and then 6 months later you address the same situation again, make a new agreement again. This is my personal point of view. I think good governance, meaning good decision-making to guide the flow in the organization, should lead to less governance. So what I see is people are making decisions specifically to free people up to get on with the work. So how can we clarify your domain as clearly as possible so that anything that comes up in that, you are free to take care of it? It's like free the individual, free the team, free the department, whatever group of people it may be. And one pattern that's useful for that is this one around clarifying domains. So this is a template for domain description. And many organizations I've been involved with, not just over the last couple of years, but over many years with Sociocracy too, have been using something similar to this. Inviting individuals within the organization, hey, could you take a look at what you do and maybe just make a few notes? What are the key responsibilities that you take care of, the key subdrivers, we could say? And what are the constraints? I mean enabling as well as governing, So what's your budget, what's your time, what's your permissions, your privileges, and blah, blah, blah. So that people understand what it is they're doing, and then get some feedback from others to evolve it. And very quickly, within the teams and for people within their roles, you can have clearly defined domains, visible, transparent, and anybody at any time can just search by tag or something, and go in there and find specific domains. This is also really useful for feedback, because it gives us something to reflect on when we offer individuals and teams feedback. So this thing of delegating accountability down through the system to people, semi-autonomous, self-organizing, self-governing groups of people. Agility. So
it's a 30-minute talk, yeah?
You can't really have effectiveness at scale in an organization with a decentralized power unless you have clarity around domains. And not only that, you also need to have clear conduit for information and influence to flow as it needs to. Yeah, so linking between domains is something we see organizations starting to do. And kind of discovering organizational structure as a consequence of looking at where information and influence needs to flow. So not upfront design of organizational structure, but no, identify what are your needs regarding flow of information and influence, what kind of structures would most facilitate that, and then discover the organization that wants to emerge. So S3 has numerous patterns for organizational structure.
I'm joking.
And this picture really is just to illustrate like this dynamic, constantly changing, morphing system as groups of semi-autonomous people make and evolve in agreements that lead to guidelines for behavior, new roles or changes to roles. If you want roles are not mandatory in S3. Teams, circles, open domains, I won't go into why we draw the distinction, but basically groups of people organizing work. Nested within
hierarchy.
Nested within like super domains of accountability. One pattern for organizational structure that people seem very excited about, including me, is the Delegate Circle. So if you're a startup and you kind of reach that size where you're a little too big and it's too clunky for everybody to come together to deal with everything, but you have some drivers that concern the whole system, then a Delegate Circle is a really cool way to address it. It can replace executive function, it can replace board function. I'm curious to see how, like as we run more experiments, how organizations can grow with Delegate Circle. It's a bottom-archy. People from the different operational domains selecting representatives to come together, make and evolve good enough for now, safe enough to try agreements, and then acting on them back in the operational domains. With feedback loops, so if anything's not working out, people rapidly learn and they can evolve these agreements further. Delegate Circle is really, really awesome. If you were wanting to flip an organization on its head and grow it from the bottom up and keep it that way. And the delegates, what we see is delegates deciding, let's have some coordinators to coordinate work. So they kind of even bringing in a management function. Only they have the power to remove the managers again if they want to. So going back to what it really should be now, which is service role. Like I'm in service to you if I'm managing things. And if I'm not doing a great job or if something's going to be better, then I can not be in service again.
Well, this is there.
Selecting people to roles. I wish I had 5 more minutes, but selecting people into roles. Recently, there's a great example, AgileByExample. It's up online. Kalle Persson is speaking about their experiences with S3 in AgileByExample, a 100-person tech department within a wider organization. They went from managers appointing chapter coaches to the team selecting the chapter coaches. The nominees made a decision between them who would be the chapter coach. So it was by the team, for the team, from the team. Peer reviews, a bit like Jürgen Appello's 360s. So inviting others to come, give me feedback, what went well, how can I improve, and me sharing what I did well and what I can improve. Finally then, participation. Coming back to participation, you don't really have to do very much to create participation if you address those other 3 dimensions. Because people naturally want to participate when they have ownership, when they have voice, when they can influence, they naturally become more accountable. Yeah? And if you build in the feedback loop so that people can learn and grow, then everybody feels so much safer to fail if necessary, stand on the stage, and really show up, bring themselves. And finally on that, just to wrap up, I think for me, this is probably one of the most challenging, simple, and powerful patterns in S3, artful participation. Is my behavior in this moment the greatest contribution I can make to the effectiveness of our collaboration? And if not, what can I do differently right now to bring value to all of us? So, thank you very much.